Welcome back. And thank you for joining me here at Eyes Machine Lab. In this video, we're going to go through the assembly process for the Random Waves Drumboy Mini. Now, as I've mentioned before, I'm completely new to this kind of gear, so this isn't meant to be an expert walkthrough. This is really just my first experience putting everything together, learning as I go, and hopefully helping out anyone else who might be starting from the same place. So, let's get into it. Throughout the video, I'll be showing an image of each step from the assembly guide, followed by video footage of my own experience during that part of the build. I'll also point out areas where I struggled a bit, things to pay closer attention to, and in one particular step, what not to do. So hopefully this can serve as a helpful companion alongside the official instructions. All right, let's begin with step A. Remove the 4 corner screws on the front panel and take it off. So I've sped this section up to about 4 times the normal speed, mostly to save you from watching me remove screws for the next 20 minutes. Now, I should probably mention, this is not the speed you actually want to use while doing this yourself. Definitely take your time here, especially with some of these smaller screws. They're very easy to misplace. And trust me, you really don't want to be crawling around the floor halfway through the build, trying to find one that disappeared into another dimension. Step B. Detach the 3D printed screen frame from the middle panel. Step C. Place the new screen into the frame as shown. At this stage, we're placing the screen into the frame assembly. One thing I would definitely recommend paying attention to here is the flexible flat cable coming off the back of the display. Try to keep it laying as flat as possible against the back side of the screen while lowering everything into place. You really want to avoid bending, twisting, or putting unnecessary stress on that cable during assembly. The instructions don't specifically say anything about the protective film on the screen. But personally, I decided to leave the screen protector on during most of the assembly process, just to help avoid accidental scratches or damage while handling everything. I'll remove it a little later on once things are more secure. All right, moving on to the next step, step D. Flip both the screen and frame upside down. The frame holds the screen pretty well, but ensure it does not fall out while flipping them both over. Step E. Flip the middle panel and place it on top, letting the screen cable pass through. For this next step, we'll start by separating the middle panel from the back panel. As you lift the middle panel away, there may or may not be a little treat for you hidden underneath. I'll leave that as a surprise for anyone experiencing this for the first time. Once that's done, go ahead and set the back panel off to the side for now. Next, carefully place the screen face down, with the flexible flat cable facing upward. Then gently guide the cable through the opening in the middle panel. And again, just take your time here and avoid putting any sharp bends or stress on the cable while feeding it through. Now, don't go and do what I did by picking up just the middle panel, leaving the screen and frame behind. Step F. Make sure the black locks on the connector move freely, then gently push them to the right. Now I remember why I removed the middle panel earlier. I wanted to make it a little easier to show the black locking tabs before we continue. Step G. Insert the cable into the connector using your finger. Now we're at the step where the flexible flat cable is inserted into the connector. Before sliding the cable in, make sure the small black locking tabs are pushed over to the right into the open position. Once they're unlocked, the cable should slide into the connector fairly smoothly without much resistance. You may notice in the video that it looks like I'm bending the cable slightly while using my finger to guide it into place, but I was really just trying to make sure the connection was fully seated and aligned properly. That said, you definitely want to avoid putting any sharp bends, folds, or creases into the cable during this process. Take your time here, because the cable itself is very thin and delicate. Step H. Once fully inserted, push the lock to the left to close them. Once the cable is fully seated in the connector, the next step is to close the small black locking tabs on each side. You really don't need much pressure here at all. Just a gentle push is enough to slide the locks back into place and secure the cable. And once those locks are closed, the flexible flat cable is held firmly in position. At that point, the connection should be fully secured and ready for the next stage of assembly. Step I. Flip the middle panel, plug in the USB cable and press the LCD button. A test image should appear. Carefully turn the middle panel and screen assembly upright. While doing this, make sure to gently support both the frame and the screen together, since the display is not fully secured to the middle panel just yet. You definitely don't want the screen separating or shifting unexpectedly while rotating it into position. At this point, the instructions call for connecting the USB cable and pressing the LCD button to test the display. Now, in my case, I was using a direct wall USB power adapter here. Later on, I realized it had been mentioned, I believe on the Random Waves website, that powering the unit directly from a wall charger may not work properly during this step. And as you can see in the video, the LCD screen did not display an image when powered this way. So if you happen to run into the same thing, don't panic immediately like I did. It may simply be related to the power source being used. Thankfully, I had actually purchased an Anker Zolo power bank ahead of time in preparation for this possibility. So after disconnecting the wall adapter, I connected the Anker power bank to the USB cable and then plugged it into the Drumboy Mini's USB-C port. And almost immediately, you can see a small red indicator light appear near the bottom of the unit. Then, after pressing the LCD button once again, the test image appeared exactly as expected. So if your screen doesn't power on right away during this step, definitely double-check the power source before assuming something is wrong with the display itself. All right, now we can move on to the next stage of assembly. Step J. Unplug the USB cable and place the middle panel onto the bottom panel. With the screen now tested and working properly, I went ahead and placed the back panel down with the inside of the panel facing upward. Then, carefully lowering the middle panel and screen assembly onto the back panel, making sure everything was seated properly and aligned evenly. At this stage, you'll want to check that the screw holes on both panels line up correctly before moving forward. Taking a few extra seconds here to make sure everything is aligned will make the next steps go much more smoothly. Step K. Tighten the 4 nuts using tweezers. Using the included tweezers, begin tightening the 4 small nuts onto the bolts that secure the middle panel to the back panel. One thing worth paying attention to here is that each nut has a flat side. You'll want that flat side sitting flush against the panel as you tighten them down. Now, I'll be honest, I ended up tightening most of these off camera because those nuts are tiny and my eyes are apparently no longer operating on the latest firmware update. Also, try not to over-tighten these. They really only need to be snug enough to where they stop turning comfortably. There's no need to force them down too tightly. Just enough pressure to secure everything in place is perfectly fine. Step L. Ensure the connector locks freely, then gently push them to the right. For this next step, we're just making sure the connector locking tabs move freely. Using a gentle amount of pressure, slide both locks carefully over to the right into the open position. They should move fairly easily, so there's no need to force them. Now, I'll mention this ahead of time. The following step was probably the most difficult part of the entire assembly process for me personally. I kept having the locking tabs slide or pop back over to the left while trying to work with the connector. So, I'll explain a little more about that in the next step before moving forward. Step M. Insert the top panel cable into the connector using tweezers. Make sure the metal part is fully in. So, referring back to the difficulty I mentioned with the locking tab sliding back over to the left, what you're seeing here is essentially my struggle trying to hold the top panel steady while also inserting the flexible flat cable into the connector. Honestly, this probably would have been much easier with an extra set of hands. Unfortunately, I don't actually have footage of the successful attempt. Mostly because the moment I finally got it working, I was too relieved to even think about the camera. What eventually worked for me was holding the lower locking tab over to the right manually, while carefully sliding the flat cable into the connector at the same time. Then, once the cable was fully seated, I secured the connection by sliding the locking tabs back over to the left. I'll be completely honest. At one point, I genuinely thought I had a defective connector. But once I finally managed to get the cable aligned properly, release the lock correctly, balance the top panel, and avoid bending the cable in the process, everything worked perfectly, and at that point, I knew I was golden. Step N. Push the locks to the left to secure the cable. In this next clip, I'm just showing a closer view of where to press the locking tabs once the flat cable is fully inserted into the connector. After the cable is seated properly, the tabs can be gently pushed back into the locked position to secure the connection. From there, I carefully lower and seat the top panel onto the middle panel assembly, making sure everything lines up evenly and sits flush before moving on to the next step. Step O. Plug in the USB cable and hold the button at the bottom left for 3 seconds. Insert SD card should appear. Now, it was at this point in the assembly where I may have started going a little out of order. You'll notice in the video that I had already started fastening the screws back into the top panel, before suddenly realizing this probably would have been the ideal time to remove the protective film from the screen. So, after peeling that away, I went ahead and connected the USB cable to the USB-C port. And if you look closely during this section, you'll probably notice the screws were already installed, which technically happens in the following step. Thankfully, everything worked out properly in the end, and I didn't have to take the entire unit back apart. So, crisis avoided. Then came another moment of me apparently not paying close enough attention to the instructions. At first, I pressed the drumboy mini icon with a single quick press, and nothing happened. After a brief moment of confusion, I realized the instructions actually say to hold the button down for about 3 seconds. And once I finally followed the instructions correctly, success. The screen powered up and displayed the message, "Insert SD card." And honestly, that was a pretty satisfying moment. And now for the final step, Step P. Unplug the USB cable and tighten the 4 screws on the top panel. And yep, thanks to the magic of video editing, the screws I installed earlier have now magically appeared in the correct step according to the assembly manual. So, we'll just pretend I followed the instructions perfectly the first time. And there we have it, a fully assembled and functioning Drumboy Mini. Thank you for following along with me through the process. And if you'd like to continue the journey, be sure to check out the next video where I'll be doing a quick walkthrough of the Quick Start Guide and getting a first look at the basics of the Drumboy Mini. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.